Hello, I'm Dylan Owen and this is my prototype. I will be taking a look at concept art from Spyro the Dragon, Zelda the Wind Waker and World of Warcraft. First I will be looking at concept art for Spyro by Insomniac Studios. Here we have an early concept of Spyro by Insomniac Studios. The design's quite sharp with a lot of points. This gives him a bit of a darker appearance. Something I like about this design is its simplicity. It still keeps detail, but it is still quite simple. So, for example, the impression of scales is given from the small circles and groupings of scales. It gives the impression that there's actually scales all over the monster. To try and learn the techniques used by the artist at Insomniac, I've redrawn the concept art myself. Here I've drawn another picture of Spyro, how it later appeared. Got much more rounded edges, and this gives him much more sort of childish and friendly appearance. Next I drew some sketches of my own ideas in a similar style to Spyro. So there you see a sort of evil dragon, and the other sketch is a cartoonish rattlesnake in the same style of Spyro. The group game I'm producing concept art for is a fantasy style game. So what I did next was draw a dwarf which would fit in the fantasy game in the style of Spyro. After looking at Spyro, I looked at the art style for Zelda the Wind Waker by Nintendo. This concept art for Zelda the Wind Waker is in a very Japanese manga chibi style. So the characters have oversized heads with a lot of emphasis on their eyes. These concepts are of a character called Link in the game. To emphasise his expressions, Link's eyebrows actually show up over his fringe, which covers his forehead. Like I did for Spyro, I now redrew these concepts of Link to practice Nintendo's art style. Here I've drawn another dwarf, this time in the style of Zelda, the Wind Waker. This is a really light-hearted art style, and I think it'd appeal more to young players. I kept the simple style and overemphasised eyes for the dwarf character. The last game I looked into was World of Warcraft from the Warcraft series by Blizzard Entertainment. The concept art for this game is quite a lot more detailed than the other two games I've researched, although it's still very cartoony and out of proportion, with large hands and feet and certain characteristics. Here again I redrew the concept art, trying to keep as much detail and shading as I could into the image. And again I drew a different dwarf in the style of the Warcraft art style. After researching different games' art styles, I've written up a questionnaire. I'll give this out to different age groups of people to determine what appeals to the different age groups. I'll ask questions determining what age group they fall in at the start, and what different art styles appeal to them, and if any, what genre of games do they play. After all this, I started drawing up some of my own concept work, using some of the styles and techniques that I'd used from researching the other games. This sketch is an early concept I've done for the dwarf main character for our game. This character's for a beggar non-playable character. I think it's quite a unique, exaggerated art style. This one's another early concept, this time of a goblin in a similar style to the beggar. It's got sort of shackles on it to imply that it's sort of imprisoned by another race or character. As well as those early character concepts, I've also drawn some concepts for buildings. Here are some house fronts of some possible different styles for buildings in the game. I've gone for a really top-heavy design with all the buildings because I think it gives it a much more sort of cartoony appearance. And finally, this concept's for another building of a sort of shack-like shop, which would go in sort of Goblin Town in the game.